Greetings, fellow humans. I am Hugh.
And I am Man.
And together we are definitely not
Two
kobolds in a trench coat. We enjoy human activities, such as paying taxes,
having existential crises,
and RPG horror stories. Let's see what we've got today. Today, we have a player who joins a campaign, burns a wish, and leaves all in one session, a transphobic DM with a thing for the trans player, a DM who shadowbans Fireball, and a GM who flips out at a player for not communicating. Player joins campaign, grabs a wish, and burns it, never to be seen again, by Reddit user Pongoid. So this isn't so much a horror story as it is a WTF moment. There are Curse of Strahd spoilers ahead. My group was playing Curse of Strahd when we were level 8ish or so when a new player joins. In his first session, we find the luck blade in Strahd's castle, and the new player just happened to be the one who grabbed it. He was real pushy with the loot, and the rest of the party didn't argue. We're not really a loot-focused group, so whatever. Anyways, we didn't know it was a luck blade till he attunes to it, learns it has a wish on it, and immediately wishes to be reunited at home with his dead wife. The DM acquiesces, and the character poofs away. The player, happy as a clam, goes on and on about how he completed his character's backstory and how satisfying it was. For the rest of the party, it felt like a dude shows up, plays for 3 hours, ninja loots an amazing item, then disappears. He didn't even play long enough to tell anyone his character's backstory, so no one could share in his accomplishment. Here's the kicker, the player never showed up again. Just played long enough to take the luck blade and dip out of the party. WTF? Edit. Everyone is saying the player and DM planned this. They did not. We were paying the DM to run this game on Roll20, and the player was another player's friend. The DM and player lived over 900 miles from each other with no prior contact.
Yeah, that is definitely a WTF moment. You're just gonna show up, reunite with your dead wife, and sayonara.
I mean, that is how you win D&D, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know we keep saying that you don't win D&D, but I think he just won D&D.
I can't decide whether or not this is a colossal jerk move or an ultimate speedrun. I don't know whether I can be that mad as an observer.
No, not really. I mean, I get that it might be a little frustrating since it was kind of a big magical item, but you gotta respect it, you know?
I mean, bro saw the opportunity to complete his story arc and he took it.
Fair play. Fair play.
I will at least give the party a bit of condolence here. I can understand that it would be frustrating to be at this table.
Oh yeah, for sure. It would be super frustrating to be working this hard. Some newbie shows up, yoinks the magical item, and then is like, bye.
This is a matter of perspective, really. We'll let the viewers decide whether this guy was a jerk or a hero.
I realized the transphobic DM had a weird infatuation with me, a trans man. By Reddit user, maybe I'm Magpie. A while back, I made a post here which I have now deleted since it was far too long and disjointed. This horror story is related to that story, so I'll add a TLDR for it here. Despite not being pitched as such, this campaign was more like a bunch of one-shots put together as a campaign and was filled with multiple half-hour unrelated tangents and distractions from DM and another player. The players were shot down whenever they tried to do things related to their character, and that guy was never told to stop metagaming. Eventually, the number of players went from around 6 or 7 to 4 before the DM just ended the campaign early. For a bit of context, I'm a trans man, and in this campaign, I first played a sorcerer who was essentially an escaped test subject who looked a little unnatural because of it. At first, I thought it was because of the way my character was that seemingly all the NPCs were interested in my character, and that they were constantly making comments about how different I was, and they had never seen anything like me. Every time this happened, the DM pulled a weird face and did a strange grabby hand motion that made me really uncomfortable, sometimes making weird sexual jokes towards me alongside these comments. Yo, grabby hands?
Yeah, that part was particularly uncomfortable.
Ooh, you look different.
That part really weirded me out. I was just so WTF. I can't even form a sentence really about how much that's messed up my brain.
I mean, who does grabby hands anymore? Like in as a serious thing.
Apparently, DMs experience confusion about who they're attracted to.
I was fed up with this othering of me, and I thought that playing the sorcerer wasn't the best thing, so I switched the character out for a monk fairy that basically got isekai'd into the world. But even that didn't stop the DM being weird, and despite there being fairies in this world, apparently they were interested as I was a different type of fairy or some other BS excuse. As per the title, the DM was transphobic, but was subtle enough with it that I almost didn't notice it until late into the campaign, where he started to show his true colors. The more noticeable and extreme example of this is where he got mad at a trans woman for being upset and telling a committee member of the game's society that they unknowingly and unintentionally used a slur that is commonly used against trans women, saying that she was too woke and that he had to walk on eggshells around her. As much as I wanted to call him out on it, I didn't feel safe to do so, as there were more people in the situation than seemed to be agreeing with him. Now, this might be because I'm an autistic aro ace, but I didn't fully realize that the DM was borderline infatuated with me until several months after the campaign ended and no contact when the DM messaged me to check on me and ask what I was doing. I mentioned it to another player who I was still in contact with at the time, who was chill, and he said that he hadn't reached out to anyone else for any reason since the campaign ended, which made it even weirder. Anyway, luckily the DM graduated and he was gone from the university that campaign was being run at, and everyone who knew him in the game society was relieved. TLDR, the weird and creepy transphobic DM, after months of the campaign being finished, having no contact, sent a message to me, a trans man. Getting the message and looking back at his behavior in the campaign towards me made me realize that he had some weird infatuation with me.
I mean, I know it's a trope to say that every bigot is some kind of in the closet, because it's absolutely not true. I think we may have found a case of someone who's transphobic being attracted to a trans person and not being able to deal with that appropriately.
Yeah, usually you see it with straight men that are transphobic being attracted to trans women. So this one's actually a new one. Yeah, he was definitely being weird. I mean, the grabby hands and the comments about how different you are is just, ugh. It
all comes back to the grabby hands.
Bro, no. It's one thing when you're doing it as a joke, but to do that to somebody seriously? Ooh. I think it's also telling, too, that when he left, everybody in the game society was very relieved.
I get the feeling he was more of a problem than just this, and may have just generally been a bit creepy.
Seems like he was a bit of a nuisance all the way around, so good riddance.
I pull off a massive multi-kill with Fireball, and never get to use the spell again. By Reddit user Potato271. So I've been playing a campaign with the same group for ages. We met once a week and played for a couple of hours at a time. We mostly played fairly short, low-level campaigns, with the DM rotating, so we didn't really get an opportunity to try out our high-level stuff. One time though, the DM at the time decided to run a longer campaign from level 1 to 10. It was really fun, even though we progressed quite slowly. After about a year and a half of real time, we finally hit level 5. Now we were a party of 5, a sorcerer, me, a wizard, a cleric, a paladin, and a rogue. Now both the wizard and I took Fireball on level up, because why wouldn't you? And we were really excited to blow some stuff up.
I mean, that's the whole point of Fireball. You take it because why not? And boom boom, shake the room.
A boom boom, incinerate the room. The DM liked to run relatively long dungeons with little to no opportunity to rest. So we always had to conserve resources, and in fact often ended up with only cantrips left anyway. So both the wizard and I hoarded our 3rd level spell slots. We reached the final battle with 1 each. I used counterspell once, and the wizard burned a slot on dispel magic. The final battle is against a necromancer, who's created a simulacra of the party and raised a horde of skeletons. All of them are quite close to each other. Perfect, right? We roll initiative. I roll a 19, the wizard rolls a 17, so we go first and second. 2 fireballs later, and the enemies are just down to the necromancer and the paladin simulacrum, with everything else getting blown to bits before they could even move. The DM is visibly annoyed, but we continue onward, leaving the dungeon and heading back to the city. The next quest is to retrieve a magic gemstone from the tribe living inside the volcano. Because of the location, all of the enemies are demons that are immune to fire. Okay, fair enough. We have spells other than Fireball, and the paladin gets a chance to shine in the narrow tunnels. By itself, nothing wrong so far. But we keep playing, and for quest after quest, it feels like everything is designed to specifically prevent us from using Fireball. Sometimes the enemies are immune to fire, even when you wouldn't expect them to be, like vampires or random mercenaries. Sometimes the dungeons are too tight with poor lines of sight, which ends up making ranged attacks next to impossible and screws over the rogue as well as the spellcasters. One time, every single bandit we fought had a hostage. Several in real life months later, and I have not cast Fireball a single time since the first time. It's starting to get quite annoying, but then the last straw happens. We're in a dwarven mine, we fought through narrow tunnel system, chasing a warlord. Finally, we corner him in a larger cavern. I throw Fireball at him. Then the wooden supports, which had never before been mentioned, get destroyed by the explosion, and the ensuing cave-in kills half of the party. And that was how my first ever D&D group fell apart.
Alright, I get it. Fireball is a bit of a broken spell, and it's notoriously so. But, oh my god. To the point that you've killed half your party, that's how far you're willing to go to make sure that people don't use Fireball or have really bad consequences for using Fireball? Just talk to your players, man!
I partly get it. Any good DM would create some encounters where the use of Fireball is not a good idea and probably impossible. You got to encourage other solutions other than nuking everything. But at that point, to then literally turn it on the party and use it to kill half of them after denying them for ages is a horror story worthy move.
This is where communication with your party becomes super important. If it annoyed you and it's frustrating that Fireball ruined your plans for a certain battle, deal with it like an adult and move on. Instead of just being like, oh, actually they're immune to fire, and oh, actually you can't cast Fireball because all these guys have innocent hostages.
I think you find that there are no innocent hostages when it comes to desire to use Fireball. Only more victims.
Listen, you don't want to be as bad as that guy who was a firebender or whatever from one of our previous episodes, but there's a balance.
A reasonable comment. I'm only joking. Or am I? Who knows? Winky face.
Grabby hands.
Cast Fireball from Grabby Hands.
GM kicks me for not communicating for 4 days despite being active over 4 days. By Reddit user ScarGamer79. This is relatively recent, so I'll tell the story while I still have it in my mind. A few weeks ago, I agreed to join an online game, which, from experience, is always a gamble, and we were getting ready to have our first game. This worked fine for me because I was just going to get home from a long road trip by then. Now, despite the fact that I was on the road, I agreed to call while I was on said trip, and even explained that I was on the road at the time. I thought everything went well. I had a character concept ready and just needed the backstory sent. However, during the last day of the road trip I was on, I had no signal, so I could not read or see anything that he sent to me. I knew the GM was aware that I was on the road trip, so I didn't worry. When I did have signal, I got links to join the game, which was starting 2 days earlier than I was informed, so I joined and sent a very rough backstory and clarified I'd update it once I got home. So when I got home and finally got ready to send my stuff, I see a message from the GM. I open the message and it claims that I'm childish, immature, and self-absorbed for not talking for 4 days. I respond rather confused and tell him that I had only just gotten home and was getting ready to send him the completed backstory. I then got blocked by the GM and kicked from the game before I could even ask why they got the idea that I wasn't talking for 4 days. It was kind of disorienting going through being seemingly good terms and then insulted and kicked out. Now, if I wasn't talking enough without cause or not responding at all, I'd understand being kicked. But I had a reason which was communicated and explained prior, so safe to say I was surprised. I'm just glad I dodged a bullet because that came out of nowhere. The sad part is, I genuinely wanted to play the game and was excited for it.
Yeah, OP, you definitely dodged a bullet with that one. If the GM is melting down at you over that when you had actually communicated properly and behaved like a very responsible adult, you wanted none of what that game would have been like.
I wonder if maybe they just had a problem with OP's character and were just looking for an excuse to kick them.
There's every possibility there was a side reason there. It's also possible that the GM was just unstable and not a very pleasant, patient person.
Yep, that's always a possibility. I don't understand where the GM was coming from on this one. There might be more to the story that we haven't seen. Again, communication with your players helps avoid these situations. If you're just honest and you tell them what your issue is, then y'all can just work it out and work through it.
And cast Fireball from Grabby Hands.
And cast Fireball with grabby hands. Hey Hugh.
Yes, man.
What do you call a magician who's incredibly good with cooking?
I don't know, what'd you call him?
A sorcerer.
And with that, we have definitely not been two kobolds in a trench coat. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make the necessary sacrifices to Tiamat. We'll see you next time.